Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Off-Farm Income Podcast. Hey, this is Matt Breckwald. Thank you so much for joining us here on our YouTube channel. Well, today we are talking all about the North American bison. I was lucky enough back at the National Association of Farm Broadcasters Conference in Kansas City just about 2 weeks ago now to be able to have a great conversation with the executive director, Dave Carter of the National North American Bison Association, and he was good enough to come on the Off-Farm Income Podcast and talk to us all about this niche business. I found it to be a very interesting discussion. I definitely went into the interview thinking that infrastructure-wise and handling-wise, that for somebody like myself, it might be impossible or just too much to raise bison. But I come out of the interview thinking, no, this is a real possibility for me or for anybody out there who's interested in this great and majestic and niche protein animal. So we're going to have that coming up for you right now. And Dave, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for coming on today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Matt. Good to visit with you.
You as well. It was great to meet you in Kansas City.
Oh, we always enjoy the Farm Broadcasters Convention is a real highlight. It's just a great way to connect with folks all the way from Pennsylvania to Oregon.
That is true. And I'm almost there. I'm in Idaho, so I'm right next to Oregon. But yeah, that was my first time out to Kansas City and my first time to that convention. But man, it was great. There was so many people to talk about agriculture with.
A lot of different voices in agriculture and a lot of energy in that room. So it's we've been there probably, I want to say, about 8 years, and
Okay.
We enjoy going every single year.
Yeah, it was great. And of course, that led me to an interview with you and introduction to the National Bison Association. So I'm excited to be able to talk about it. And I wonder if we might start off by just having you introduce yourself to our audience. Just tell us a little bit about you, where you live, that type of stuff.
Sure. Well, Dave Carter. I'm executive director of the National Bison Association. I've been there for about 19 years, kind of backed into it like everybody. It seems like everybody gets into bison business. I had worked for 25 years for a general farm organization, and then it decided at one point it was never too late to have a midlife crisis. I was going to go off and do some consulting. Particularly, my passion was working with folks that were involved in natural meat production and alternative marketing, farmers markets, organic production, and stars aligned. And I ended up at the Bison Association as executive director. Fell in love with the animal and the folks that raise it. So about a year after I started, my wife and I bought our first 5 heifer calves, and now we're partners with 2 other ranchers on a herd of about 220 mother cows out east of Denver, Colorado. So it's been a great experience for me, and I've loved every minute of it.
Very cool. So you've got your own herd, but in a partnership with 2 other partners.
So we're in a partnership with 2 other ranchers, and we actually operate on land that's owned by the Savory Institute, which is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to regenerative agriculture. So they have about 7,800 acres out east of about 40 miles east of Denver, and we're fortunate enough to have the lease to run the bison on there, and we work together with them to really run it as a regenerative operation and to measure and monitor how we're building the soil and how those animals are restoring the grasslands.
So is the goal to try and return those grasslands to what they were when bison were roaming out there wild?
Well, there is to a certain extent. It's the history of bison production and bison ranching is really fascinating, because if you go back, the first people started drifting into it really in the late 1960s, the 1970s, and then what a lot of us that were involved in agriculture remember, the 1980s was the farm crisis,
right.
And a lot of folks were desperately seeking for some alternatives, and bison seemed like a emerging opportunity. So you had folks come into the business during that period. And when I go back and look at the old magazines and journals at that time, I think a lot of the articles that were written at that point should have been entitled "Everything I Know About Raising Cattle."
Okay.
Because it was a lot of cattle producers that were coming into the business, and they were bringing their knowledge of cattle production in and trying to apply it to bison. And it was kind of a philosophy of, well, we can treat them like cattle, but we just need higher fences and stronger handling equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found, and I continued to read the literature and the journals that we have as the years progressed. And I think what we found is that we've kind of taken a step back and we've let the animal teach us. Yes, these animals, there are some similarities to cattle, but they're a lot different. They're an undomesticated animal. And we find that the less that we intervene with them, the better off we are. The less work we have to do, the better the animal does.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really great about that is that when you really take a step back and think about the long view, is we're in an ecosystem that evolved under thousands and thousands and thousands of years of direct interaction with bison. There were other grazers out there as well, the deer and the antelope and
Mm-hmm.
the elk, but the bison were the keystone species. And as this grassland ecosystem, which is close to 40% of the North American landmass, began to evolve, it evolved under the hoofprint of the bison. Not only the grazing that helped lead to the species of grasses out there, but the wallowing that created the depressions that captured the water, and the manure and the urine that fertilized the soil,
Mm-hmm.
and the fur that created the material for the nesting birds, and all of those things, really started to shape it. And one of the stories that we're telling right now is based on that evolutionary story. And in fact, we've trademarked the term nature's original plant-based protein.
Okay.
Because there's so much discussion out there about these alternative meats and lab, grown meats and quote lab-based proteins. Well, when you think about it, Mother Nature really gave us a delicious plant-based protein called bison. And the symbiotic relationship is that that grassland ecosystem that's out there. In fact, the University of California at Davis did a report a couple of years ago where they described the grasslands as a more resilient carbon trap than the South American rainforest.
Oh, wow.
And we think about, in fact, I've long called the grasslands the North American rainforest, because those grasses are taking that carbon. They're taking that carbon dioxide out of the air, and they're putting that carbon into the soil and putting oxygen back into the air. But they can't do it by themselves. They have to have a gardener out there tending to them, and the gardener that Mother Nature provided is the bison. And so it's a really rich story that once we can get in front of people and talk to them about this really is nature's original plant-based protein, they begin to understand and appreciate not only the quality of the meat, but the important role that this animal plays.
Well, that is a heck of an introduction, and it's a great way of looking at that majestic animal. You and I were talking there in Kansas City, but when I was going to college at Montana State in Bozeman, one of Ted Turner's ranches, we were allowed to drive across to access a wilderness area, and we'd go down there all the time to go backpacking or hunting or whatever it may be, and right across that ranch, there's just buffalo everywhere, and they're really, and going down through Yellowstone as well, just a majestic animal.
They're an incredibly majestic animal, and we now consider ourselves just as much as bison producers as stewards of these animals. It's our responsibility. Yes, we're raising them for meat, but that meat's got to meet a certain quality criteria and
Right.
satisfy our customers' needs. But we also know that we have a responsibility to take care of this animal. And if we can build that relationship with our customers that's based on the quality of the meat and the story of the animal and the health and nutritional benefits, we talk about our customers are our partners in bison restoration. And so, that's another message that we're trying to get out there, that the best way to save and restore bison is to eat bison.
Okay. Now, I got to ask you, I realized as I was telling that little story right there, I was referring to him as buffalo. Are the words buffalo and bison interchangeable, or am I speaking out of turn?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Technically, the animal that we've got here in North America is bison. The scientific name is bison. About 400 years ago, the first French trappers went up the Mississippi and down the St. Lawrence, and they looked at these big furry animals out there, and they called it boof, which is French for beef.
Okay.
And the Native Americans heard that, and so they started with all of their interaction with the trappers and the mountain men and whatnot. The reference was always buffalo.
Okay.
And so they really began to use the term buffalo. Now, in most of the world, when you mention buffalo, that describes water buffalo, which is a whole different species. Its scientific name is Bubalus bubalus, and it's more prevalent in India and Asia. But here in the U.S., we've long referred to bison as buffalo. It was Buffalo Bill Cody out there, and the Buffalo Nickel, and a few of us will take a nip of Buffalo Trace whiskey from time to time, and that's all describing bison.
Okay.
But it's gotten to be a problem for us in recent years, in that some companies that are marketing pet food or even putting meat into the human food marketplace are bringing in water buffalo meat or water buffalo ingredients and just labeling it as buffalo and putting it in products in a way that makes people believe that what they're buying is American bison. So fortunately, we've been able to work with Senator Hoeven out of North Dakota and Senator Bennett out of Colorado to introduce some legislation called the Truth in Buffalo Labeling Act. There's a similar bill that's getting ready to get introduced in the House to really make sure that if something is in the U.S. market and it's water buffalo, it needs to be labeled as water buffalo, because consumers have every right to believe that when they see the term buffalo, they're buying bison.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's interesting. I'd never even given any thought to that, and that kind of shows you where my mind has been. But until I spoke with you at the convention, that is not something that ever crossed my mind, that if I was looking at something that said buffalo, well, which one is it that we're actually talking about?
Yeah. Oh, and if I walked out onto the street in Bozeman or in Denver or Washington, D.C. and showed people, a picture of the animal, I can guarantee you 50% or more of them would say, oh, that's a buffalo. And that's how ingrained it is in our culture here in the U.S. And we don't mind. We don't care what you call it. We just want you to eat it and enjoy it.
Now, I want to ask you a little bit more about the business aspect of what you get to do with the raising of the buffalo. So you said you and the two ranches that you partner with, you're running the buffalo. And what was the name of that ground that you're running it on?
So we're running it's a ranch that's actually owned by the Savory Institute.
Savory,
again,
okay.
A nonprofit that
Okay.
It works with ranchers for regenerative agriculture, yes.
And so do you lease that ground, or are you almost a service provider by bringing the buffalo in?
No, we lease the ground. We pay so much per animal per year for the rights to graze the grass that's on there, but we work in partnership with them. I'm not the most active partner in the partnership, obviously, because I've traveled around the country with the National Bison Association. But the on-site managing partner there sits down with the folks from Savory, and they develop a grazing plan. We've divided the ranch into specific paddocks, and we move the animals around, really trying to mimic what Mother Nature did with them through the thousands of years, so that they have that natural interaction with the ground, that we get the right amount of animal impact when the animals are in there grazing it intensively, but then we also make sure that there are long periods of rest so that grass and those other plants can come back healthier than before and put down even deeper roots.
Okay. Well, here's what I want to do really quick, Dave. I've got a great sponsor to the show. I want to acknowledge them really quick, but I think it'll be a great segue into my next question. So everybody, of course, I'm going to be talking about Powder River livestock handling equipment. They make absolutely fantastic squeeze chutes, cattle panels, runways, sweep tubs, calf tables, whatever you need to handle your large livestock. They've been doing it for over 80 years out here in the West with some of the wildest cattle we have in this country, in the world, and if they can handle those cattle, they can certainly handle yours. Please go on over to powderriver.com, check out what they've got to offer, and please let your local farm and ranch retailer know that you would like to see Powder River in their yard. That's powderriver.com, everybody. All right, Dave, well, you can probably see how this segues in, because I want to know about the type of livestock handling equipment that you have to use to handle animals as large and as powerful as bison.
Well, and I'll just say, as a matter of fact, there's a lot of Powder River equipment out there on bison ranches,
Awesome.
along with others. So you bet. No, and when we think about raising bison, there's really the four factors. There's the animal, there's the land, there's the fencing, and the handling equipment. So we'll jump into the handling equipment first, because that is where ranchers will probably end up spending more money than they would with domesticated livestock. The great thing about bison, one of our members, I love the way she describes it. She said bison are a little bit harder to handle, but they're a whole lot easier to raise.
Okay.
And of course, the handling part comes in about once a year, when you really bring them in for what some of us call a roundup, others call a gathering. But that's when you bring the herd in and you're weaning the calves, or you're vaccinating the animals, putting the ear tags in, preg checking the mamas, just running them through. And that's where we encourage people that, yes, you need to make sure that you've got good, sturdy handling equipment, but also handling equipment that is designed properly to reduce the stress, to minimize the stress on the animals. And encourage people to really give some thought to that. One of the benefits of our business is for newcomers that come in, the people that have been around the business for a while love to sit down with prospective producers or new producers and kind of help them work through that aspect so that they're starting off on the right foot. The other aspects of the equation, though, I would just say, when it comes to fencing, yes, you do have to have good fencing for bison. Where we run ours, we have a 6-strand barbed wire, and that top strand is about 5 foot high.
Okay.
But really, it's more important to make sure that you've got good grass or good pasture and good water and the right social mix of animals. Because if those factors are in balance, then the animals aren't going to want to get out. If you throw those things out of kilter, well, there aren't a lot of fences that'll hold them in. I mean, we've got a 5-foot barbed wire fence, but these animals can jump 6 feet. So, if they want to get out, they could do that. When it comes to the land, people always ask, gosh, what's the carrying capacity? How much land do I need to have for bison? Well, obviously that varies around the country based on climate and precipitation and soil types. But the good rule of thumb is whatever USDA NRCS recommends for cattle is the same for bison. It's really a one-for-one conversion. In fact, some people say you can put a few more bison out there, but we tell people to start off with those NRCS recommendations. And then finally, the animals, the cost of the animals. Right now, the animals are very much equivalent to the price of breeding cattle. You can get calves for around $1,200 to $1,600 a piece right now. Yearlings running a little north of $2,000. Bred heifers maybe $2,800. And when you get all of that put together, then we'll start off with the bison disadvantage, which is that mother cow or female bison is not going to give you her first calf until she's 3 years old, where our friends in the cattle business, they get a calf at 2 years. So you lose a year on the front end. But then after that, we say all of the bison advantages kick in. That same female animal will probably give you about twice as many calves over the course of her lifetime as a beef animal would. Bison females will go into their 20s calving every year. Our first 5 heifers are 16 years old right now, and we lost one along the way to an accident, but the other 4 are calving, just putzing along every year. Then the other advantages you get is the low maintenance on the animal. We don't dehorn them, we don't castrate them, we don't brand them, we don't even use artificial insemination. We like to say we let romance happen out in the pasture and just let Mother Nature take its course. So there's not a lot of management. And then you're in Idaho, you get one of those blizzards that kind of roars out of the north, and you wake up the next morning and, if you're in domesticated livestock, well, probably the first thing you're thinking about is, gosh, how much feed do I need to get out there to keep that herd alive.
Right.
And if you're in the bison business, you kind of say, gosh, I hope I got enough coffee in here so I can brew myself a good pot and kind of enjoy the fireplace today, because you don't worry about, there's not much that the Mother Nature's going to throw at these animals that they haven't seen over the last 5,000 years.
Yeah.
And same thing during calving season. We always tell folks that calving season is the best time to go fishing, because we haven't bred these animals to give calves bigger than Mother Nature intended. And in all reality, they don't want you anywhere near them when they're calving. Just stay away and leave them alone, and they'll do just fine. So, those are things that go back to that phrase of, they're just a little bit harder to handle, but they're a lot easier to raise because they've been part of this ecosystem for thousands of years.
Sure.
And they'll do just fine if we don't over intervene.
So is their gestation period, is it the same or similar to a cow's, that 283 days?
Very similar. Yeah, it's a 9-month gestation period.
Okay.
We calve a little bit later than the cattle folks.
Okay.
Our breeding season is really from July to September, and then calving season kicks in really mid-April through, the first part of June.
And so are you controlling when those bulls are in there, or are they seasonal breeders? Do they control when they get bred themselves?
No, most people just leave the bulls in all the time. And we have very few people that run a single sire thing. I mean, again, with our 220 mother cows, we've got 17 bulls in there, and we let them sort it out during the breeding season. Just stay out of their way, and they'll get it figured out.
So then, how do you control that calving season? Is Mother Nature taking care of that for you?
Mother Nature takes care of that.
Okay.
And you think about, this is one of the real miracles or marvels of this animal. This cycle that they evolved in. So you start off in let's just say you start off in the summer, and those females, when they start cycling in July, they're on the gain. They're coming through that period when they're coming off of the freshest, greenest grass of the season. And so they're on the gain. They're physically in the best position to conceive during that rut, during July and through September.
Mm-hmm.
Then in the fall, that's when the grasslands and the rangelands, you get those grasses that start to near dormancy. And boys say it's a fallacy that grain finishing bison is something new, because if you take a look in the fall out across a pasture and you see kind of that golden hue out there, those are the seed heads on the grasses, and that's got some grain in it, and it was Mother Nature's way of putting some fat on, particularly those females. They had that new fetus in there, and so they needed to bulk up on the fat, because they got two people, they got two bodies to get through the winter. And so coming in about right now, they should be in the best physical condition of the year. And then over the course of the winter, it's not unusual for those females to lose 10 to 15% of that body weight from here, because they're living off of that fat. And they're coming into the spring, and particularly during that last trimester is probably, the grass has still got protein on it, but it's not putting fat on either the mom or the fetus that's inside of her. And so come calving time, the mom doesn't have a lot of extra body fat on her that's going to constrict the birth canal, and the fetus isn't overly large. And so that fetus comes out at the time when all of a sudden there's that new grass that mom is going to eat and provide the good nutrients in her milk. It's an incredible cycle that plays out year after year after year.
Well, how about their feed conversion? So you're talking about when it storms, you're talking about the fact of maybe even being able to exceed those NRCS guidelines. So buffalo they're huge animals, as big or bigger than many or maybe almost all cattle, at least when I'm looking at them. So are they just converting feed better? What's the trick there? Or how's that work?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we don't get the rate of gain that our neighbors in the cattle business do, because we haven't bred the animals to
right.
to be what I call the meat wagons.
Yep.
And it's illegal to use growth hormones in bison, which we're happy about that. So we don't use growth hormones. We don't use antibiotics for feed conversion purposes. So, on that hand, if you're trying to finish a bison compared to a beef cow, you won't get the rate of gain on a bison that you do. And that's why our animals tend to go to slaughter later. In the beef business, animals will go 14 to 18 months. In the bison business, it's 22 to 26 months, maybe 28 months for them to go. So now, with that being said, though, where we get the advantage is when that blizzard comes through. Two very interesting things happen. Two important things is, number one, in the wintertime, the bison's metabolism drops significantly. And so their feed needs are significantly less. They don't need to be consuming as much feed to keep that body warm. And of course, they've got the advantage that they've got a hide on them, and they've got a hair structure that is only marginally less insulating than the polar bears. So, when that cold weather hits, you can go out in a pasture after a snowstorm, and you look at the bison, and that snow is just sitting on top of them. It's not melting at all and getting down to their skin because they're so insulating. And then, of course, the hump on a bison is just a massive muscle that exists for the purpose of keeping that head moving. And so when there's snow on the ground, that head turns into a giant snowplow that gets them down to the forage that's underneath the snow. And so that's why they can do so well out there without us having to haul hay or other feed out to them right after a blizzard.
Got it. But of course, like a lot of the pastures around the West in the winter, when we get those storms, that forage has been taken off. So if you're not managing your forage that way and you're raising bison, then you do need to provide that supplemental feed.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't argue with that. And one of the things, I should mention when we talk about the NRCS thing, make sure that when you're talking to NRCS about the grazing, the carrying capacity, that you're not just talking about grazing seasons. In the bison business, we don't load up the animals and haul them from one pasture to another. If they're out in an area, they're probably out there year round. You don't have your summer pasture and your winter pasture and whatnot. And so you really need to be working with NRCS or, other consultants to make sure that, when it comes into the wintertime, they haven't taken all of the grass out there. There's some out there, either you're going to let them harvest what Mother Nature left out there, or you are going to have to get up and get your overalls, get your Carhartts on in the morning and load up the feed and haul out there. So it's kind of your choice of what you want to do, sit inside by the fire or haul feed out to the herd.
Okay, now let me ask you about the equipment question. So like you mentioned, putting ear tags in, preg testing, things like that. So is there special equipment made for handling bison, or do you have to retrofit?
Not really. Most of the companies that design handling equipment, good sturdy cattle handling equipment will generally work for bison.
Okay.
You do need to make sure you got a head catch on the squeeze chute. That's pretty vital because you don't want them just blowing through there.
Right.
You need to make sure that, particularly if you're working some mature bulls in there, that the area going into the squeeze chute is wide enough that they don't catch their horns.
Yeah.
Because boy, all of a sudden they catch their horn, they're gonna balk and get sour, and it's gonna be a rodeo trying to get them in there, and you don't want that.
Right.
We have encouraged more and more people too to kind of back away from the old style systems with big catwalks and the like, and to get things more down on the ground. So that, even though you have solid sides on the handling equipment, you've got some slots or some areas that you can look through there and monitor the animals. But these animals have a incredibly strong prey predator instinct to this day. And so, if you're working them and you're standing up above them, looking down on them, you're kind of that predator that is going to make them nervous and put stress on them. And and you're trying to get them to move through the equipment smoothly, well, they've got an eye on you because, they're going to look at the predator first.
Sure.
So, there are some of those things that we work with our folks on, but there are a great number of good equipment manufacturers out there that do cattle equipment that can be easily converted to bison.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about the business aspect of this, and I'm always looking for an edge for my listeners, a way for them to find a way that can get them out and help them succeed in farming or raising livestock, whatever that may be. So as we're talking about bison, and I'm thinking of the business aspect of it, I'm hearing you get a calf a year later, you get a finished bison ready to be slaughtered every 2 years versus, say, every 18 months, every 14 months, whatever that may be. So those sound, if you're trying to compare apples to apples, and I know it's not an apples to apples comparison, but if you're looking at it that way, those sound like negatives. So my assumption is that on the other end of this, there is a competitive advantage that makes up for some of those longer time periods when it comes to selling your buffalo and looking at this as a business enterprise.
So the big difference is that we made a decision years ago that we will always be a niche business.
Mm-hmm.
We never want to be a mainstream commodity. I like to tell people that beef does the best job in the world of being beef. So why in the world would we want to be another version of beef? We want to be. And so, even though we're growing, we're still a very small business.
Uh-huh.
And we've carved out our niche with folks that are willing to pay a premium price
mm-hmm.
for not only the taste of the meat, but, the nutritional attributes, the environmental story, those special factors of what makes bison.
Sure.
So, when you think about it, yeah, there's more time involved and you lose that first year on calving.
Mm-hmm.
But, when you compare, we're in a bit of a market slump right now, and still the carcass price for a 2-year-old bull, you'll take it and you'll get about 650 pound carcass, and the price that the processors are paying on that is about $4.25 a pound.
Okay.
Which is, a significant premium. If you go into the grocery store, I was just in Costco earlier today and went and looked, and they've got, ground bison in there right now that's paying bringing $8 a pound if you buy a 2.5 pound pack, compared to, I didn't even compare it to what the beef is. So, there's a premium involved there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things that I love about the bison business is that we're very entrepreneurial and we're incredibly diversified. You mentioned Ted Turner earlier in the program and
mm-hmm.
going through his ranch. Ted has been a great factor in our business and a real leader. And he's got 15 ranches and about 50,000 head of bison and a chain of restaurants, about 40 restaurants, Ted's Montana Grill, that he has in connection with George McCarroll, and supplies a lot of the bison meat that ends up in the conventional retail side. And, so there's a few years back, I was given my annual report at our conference and looked out, and there was Ted
mm-hmm.
sitting in the audience and with his place in our business, and literally sitting next to him, talking with him, was this young couple that have maybe 30 head of bison,
mm-hmm.
and they sell buffalo burgers out of a food truck.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, those are the bookends of
Sure.
our business.
Sure.
And both of them are, in their own way, are doing an incredible job to build our business. Ted's got his restaurants, and the young couple, they're standing there handing out samples on toothpicks to get everybody to take their first taste. And so that's, we have folks, we've matured to the point where folks that come in that want to run the traditional cow-calf or finishing or, sell into the commercial market. We've got a great group of commercial processors in the bison business now that are working to bring the meat into Costco and Whole Foods, Kroger, and other outlets.
Mm-hmm.
But we have got so many people that have taken their life savings and bought, a few hundred acres and put a small herd out there, and they're marketing product at farmers markets or out of food trucks or right off the ranch. And
mm-hmm.
In fact, we just, through the help of USDA's Farmers Market Promotion Program, we were able to develop and launch a new app. It's a new mobile app called Bison.
Okay.
Bysome Bison. And people can download that and find that, smaller local producer in their area and go visit with them and buy their meat directly from them, or, maybe take the kids out for an afternoon at the ranch or whatever. So, we always say there's a place in the bison business for everyone.
Yeah, are bison being raised just out in the West, or are they being raised all over the U.S. now?
There are bison in every state of the United States, including a couple herds on the islands of Hawaii and one on Long Island, New York. So
okay.
The biggest concentration is if you go up through, I call the wheat belt, through the states from Texas up to North Dakota, and then go across the northern tier states from Wisconsin out east, over your area in Idaho. Mm-hmm. That's where the largest herds and the largest concentrations of bison are. But I was just talking a couple of days ago with a producer down in Alabama, who has been in the business for long before I came on board. So we've got bison everywhere.
Okay. Well, that is a great look at the business of raising bison. I wanted to ask you about the National Bison Association. So what does the association do? What is its purpose?
So we are a nonprofit association. We have 1,150 members, primarily ranchers and marketers, but also some bison enthusiasts, people who just love the animal. Mm-hmm. And we're the national voice for the bison business. Things like this, just opportunities to visit with you and other members of the media and tell the story of bison. We promote bison to the consumers. I was just at a conference in Atlanta, Georgia, about 6 weeks ago with about 400, they call themselves mommy bloggers, but primarily young women that have blogs on food, family, health, and the environment, and, being able to connect with them. And then we represent our members in the public policy arena, work back very closely with folks at USDA and on Capitol Hill to take care of the regulatory and the legal side of our business. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing we do is we develop a lot of educational materials and resources for bison producers. We're such a small business. We don't have the benefit of a lot of the institutional infrastructure that our friends in the commodities have. Extension Service doesn't always know that much about bison, or can't run down to the local sale barn and sell animals. And so being a part of the association puts you in touch with the other 1,149 folks out there that have a passion for this business and are more than willing to help you get started and help you succeed.
Well, and that's a great point. So if, say, somebody's listening to this show and they go, this sounds like the niche for me. This sounds like the way I want to be involved in agriculture. This sounds like a way that I could carve out a competitive advantage. Is there materials or is there information on your website or people they could connect with that could help to get them started if they're kind of coming into this ignorant of raising bison?
So the first thing anyone should do is to log on to bisoncentral.com. That's our website. Okay. It's bisoncentral.com. Depending on where you're at, there may be a state and regional association, and you can connect with them through our association. Mm-hmm. Then once you're on the website, if you're really interested in the business, the first thing to do then would be to get a hold of, it's called our Bison Producers Handbook, and it's about a 280 to 300 page book that was put together by about 25 different producers with tons of experience in everything from buying the right animal to marketing the meat. And there are some other materials on the website that you can get. But then if you're really interested, then it's the advantage is to join the National Bison Association. That way you'll have access to all of our membership list. We will do our best to put you in touch with somebody in your area that would be more than happy to have you come out and spend some time with them and see how they manage and handle their herds and how they operate their business. And they will more than likely come out and help you design your handling of systems and get a start yourself. Plus, it'll also give you an opportunity to to be a part of the conferences. We have our winter conference coming up in Denver the third week in January. We have a summer conference. We move around the country, and then our state and regional associations have conferences. And those are just great opportunities to get together and network and learn from fellow producers. So those would be the first steps I would recommend.
Gotcha. Now, I got, 25 some odd years ago. Is it that? Oh my goodness, it is that long ago. I got my bachelor's degree in animal science from a land-grant university from Montana State, and I did not study buffalo at all. I did learn about a breed called a beefalo when I was getting that degree. Are anybody crossing beef with buffalo any longer?
Well, we don't recommend it.
Okay.
The beefalo is a specific, cross of 5/8, 3/8, one. And again, this decision that we've made is that beef does the best job in the world of being beef. Right. We're something different. Why would we want to make, ourselves be? And, it's one of the things that makes the hair on our neck stand up a little bit, because from time to time, these stories will come up about, there's so many buffalo out there that have got cattle genetics in them. And that makes the consumers believe that we're deliberately crossing our animals with beef. Our code of ethics prohibit any crossbreeding with other species. We want bison to be bison. But the reality was, about 130 years ago, there were only about 700 bison left alive. And there were a handful of ranchers, particularly out in the West, that gathered up the remnants and created what we call the 5 foundation herds. And during that period, there was a huge blizzard that hit the high plains and decimated the cattle herds, and these ranchers noted that their buffalo came through it just fine. So they experimented at the time with crossbreeding, and they wanted to create a winter hardy, what they'd call cattle. And what they found was their first generation bulls were sterile, and their females had calving problems and bad attitudes.
Okay.
So they quit doing it.
Okay.
But through the years, there's some of those legacy genetics, generally less than 1.5% of their genetic makeup. And a lot of our folks today, when they're working their animals, they're actually testing their herds for genetics. And those that have a significant degree of what we call cattle integration, they're culling out of their herds, because they find that the animals that don't have the evidence of bison genetics do a lot better on the grasses and the other plants that Mother Nature put out there.
Let me clarify what you just said. They find the animals that do or do not have evidence of bison genetics do better on grass. That do not
have evidence of cattle genetics do a lot better. Yeah.
Okay.
You don't, in agriculture, there's always this desire to find hybrid vigor by crossing, two different kinds of things.
Right.
And what we found in bison is you don't get hybrid vigor.
Okay.
The best thing you can do is take the animal that Mother Nature developed for us.
Okay. Well, Dave, this is a fascinating discussion. I could go on and on. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to be sending people to bisoncentral.com for more information, to contact you, to contact the National Bison Association, and to get your handbook on raising bison. Do I have that correct?
That's right, bisoncentral.com, and any other time you want to call and visit about bison, I'm always here.
All right. Well, this is great. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you for connecting. I had a lot of fun today.
Well, thank you for joining us, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that interview. Hope you're going to go out and try some bison. And as always, enjoy your journey to the ultimate lifestyle business, agriculture.